Hi everybody, I'm Richard Conway. Welcome back to AMP, the podcast that showcases age group multisport athletes. On episode 3, I chat to Jules Richards, a GB age group multisport athlete. Jules started off sporting life with a board, a skateboard, a surfboard and a snowboard. But after a life-changing incident, recovery and sheer determination, he found himself entered into the world of multisport. Once entered, it not only changed his sporting life, but his life as a whole. Career changed, distance chosen, he began the journey to represent his country in his chosen discipline of triathlon. So welcome to AMP.
Thank you very much.
This is the third episode. I don't know whether you've listened to any of the others.
Listened to all of them actually so far. I listened to your story and then to Nick.
Yeah, so it's a concept, as you're probably aware, that came out of lockdown. How's things with lockdown with you?
Surprisingly, I feel like I've adapted to it pretty strongly. Actually, I think I must have been more of an introvert than I thought I was. There's myself and my partner and our 2 children, and it's just we've kind of adjusted to a new normal fairly quickly. It's more to do with keeping the kids sort of stimulated enough so that they're not driving us insane or each other.
Yeah, that's the key. Thanks for getting in touch and wanting to come on and sharing your story. I've read the email and interesting story that you've got. So, if you want to tell us a little bit about your sporting background from a kid and how you progressed, and obviously the big injuries and things that you've been through up to basically, I suppose, where you've you got into multisport. Yeah.
Okay, so growing up in Cornwall, very, very far southwest of Cornwall, I was never one for organised sport. Hated running, hated cross country, couldn't run track at school. I mean, when I said track, it was obviously a field. And I wasn't really overly keen on rugby or football or anything like that. I just grew up surfing and skateboarding with friends. And yeah, I obviously stayed fit through that, but I was never an organised sport type person. I've never found I particularly play well with others either, I guess. I've never been a strong team sport member, only because I like to be able to sort of have control over a performance, as it were. So when you're relying on others, there are a lot more variables there when it comes into the overall performance. So anyway, went to university and continued snowboarding there, should I say, and because I was away from the surf down in Cornwall, so I went to university in Cambridge. So I was leading a snowboarding trip to go and check out the resort for our team, and I had a bit of a snowboarding accident on the first day of the trip, which resulted in me breaking my back. I fractured my L1 vertebrae into 3 parts, compressed T12 and L2, and ended up having a metal plate implanted in my spine to sort of fuse it all back together. So got flown home from Grenoble 9 days later on Christmas Eve, my own private plane.
Wow.
I got admitted to 3 different hospitals, and each of those admissions was like 5,000 francs or something ridiculous. And then obviously the operation itself and the flight and this, that, and the third thing. I had to have a plane which allowed me to be stretchered back. So I had a nurse, a doctor, a pilot, and a co-pilot,
wow.
and me. Quite an impressive setup, actually. And in fact, I found out later on through my insurance company that I had the second highest claim in the Alps that winter. I came back and met my consultant over here, and they basically said to me, right, I was 19 at the time, and they basically said to me, right, it shouldn't hold you back too much, but you'll never do this. It's unlikely that you'll snowboard again. Running is probably not a particularly good thing for you to do due to the impact. And basically, you can exercise, but don't do anything too strenuous, because you've now got a bit of a weak point. And to me, this was a bit like a red rag to a bull, really. I don't like being told I can't do something. I think that's probably something that most multi-sport athletes have in common. Yeah. It's like, you can never do that. Oh, well, okay, you just watch me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they said, right, no exercise for 3 months. After that, you can start doing some swimming, and I'd always been a swimmer because of my surfing, and just enjoyed being in water. So after about a month, I was bored. I was back at uni, bored out of my brains, and I was like, right, I feel good enough. So I got in the pool. So after a month, I was swimming. After 3 months, I was back in the gym, just trying to build some strength up. And 9 months later, I was back snowboarding again, and had sort of taken to fitness a little bit more like I hadn't done before, because I realised that I needed to protect my back more than anything. And so the years went by, and I wasn't really into anything structured. I just kind of did sport to keep myself in shape. I went to the gym, I swam, I did a little bit of running, but nothing major. And then I decided that I wanted to run the London Marathon. I went to the gym, I swam, I did a little bit of running, but nothing major. And then I decided that I wanted to run the London Marathon, because it was one of those things that, I'd always watched it on TV and thought, wow, it's just such a phenomenal spectacle to watch the London Marathon. I thought I'd love to be part of that. I'd love to have a go. And I thought I can raise some money for a spinal charity that helped me out called Aspire, that helped me out when I came back from France. So I thought I'll raise some money. But this was 2005 when I first put my entry in for the 2006 London Marathon. Know nothing about the entry sort of the entry process. Didn't realise that it was ridiculously difficult to get into and all that sort of stuff. And surprisingly, I got a rejection letter. I was like, okay, fine. So I looked into it a little bit more and realised that it's unlikely, well, not unlikely, it's very difficult to get in through the ballot because of the number of spots. But went to apply for the following year, so in 2006 for 2007, and then disaster struck, and I snapped the brace that had been put into my spine when I was surfing down in Cornwall.
Right.
I ended up becoming quite unwell, but I'd already entered the London Marathon by this point, and I thought, well, I'm unlikely to get in the second year, but at least I've got my application on a rolling thing, so I've got two entries now. They realised that the brace was broken, so they decided that they were going to take it out that November. So I went into Exeter Hospital to have the spinal brace removed. And by doing that, they had to cut through all the muscles in my lower back, so I wasn't able to stand upright for a little while.
So how long was that then?
I was out of hospital about 5 days after the operation, not able to stand for any particular length of time. I would hobble around a bit, and then I'd have to sit down. And then, so I came out of hospital at the end of November, but I came out of hospital to find the congratulations you're in letter for the London Marathon lying on my bed.
So there's motivation.
Yeah, motivation. So I thought, well, I can either defer, or I can set this as a bit of a personal challenge. So being I think, much like most sport athletes would do, I set it as a challenge. I was like, right, I'm going to be there in April on that start line and see how we go. So by the end of December, I was able to walk to the end of my mum's drive and back, which I guess was probably 500-600 meters.
Right.
And then I looked up a training plan, and I spoke to a few people, and a lot of people, and I joined a gym, and they're all a bit like, well, it's a long shot that you're going to be able to do this, but if you're determined, then, and you're not going to set the world on fire, you've got to be prepared for a relatively slow time. So from that point, from the end of December to the April, I ran 2 to 3 times a week, cycled 2 to 3 times a week, swam twice a week, and went to the gym twice a week. I got to the point where I think my longest run was only about 16 miles. And I thought that's as far as I could really push it at that time in the lead up to, with regards to the distance to the time to the marathon. So I did it. I got round. It was massively unpleasant. So I got to the end of the marathon in 4:39, I think it was. Vowed never to do it again. And then after a week or so, I was kind of like, I kind of got the bug a little bit. I'd enjoyed all the training, and I thought I might as well do something with the fitness that I've gained from this. And being a swimmer, and well, at that point, then considered myself to be a bit of a runner, I thought, well, I'll give triathlon a go. My first race was a small local sprint down in Cornwall.
And had you any connections with anybody doing triathlon at the time?
Nope. Didn't know anyone doing it. This was back in 2007. So, it was triathlon was fairly well known, but, it wasn't. And down in Cornwall, actually, there was quite a big scene.
Right.
But I didn't know anyone doing it.
Yeah.
I just thought, I'll just give it a whirl, give it a go. I'd never ridden a road bike, so I bought a road bike like 6 weeks before the race. I think I got an entry level package from an online tri store. So it got me a wetsuit, and it got me a simple road bike and that sort of bits and pieces. I remember riding with cleats for the first time, and of course falling off. It's when you come to a junction, and you're like, oh no, I've got to take my feet out the pedals.
You're not a proper cyclist if you haven't done that.
No, that was my first. Yeah, I think it was my first ride, and I was right next to a car at the time. And they just wound down their window, laughed at me, and drove off.
It's about right.
Yeah. So I got in. I still remember doing that race because I remember coming into transition, running up to my, coming off my bike, getting off my bike, coming up to my shoes, and realising that I'd left double knots in the laces from the last time I'd taken them off. So I then spent like 3 minutes standing in transition, undoing the knots and then redoing my laces and all that sort of stuff. But the thing that really struck me at that first race was like the camaraderie between everyone there. Everyone was like cheering each other, and like clapping people across the line, or giving you a pat on the back, or just giving you a thumbs up on the bike. It was amazing. Just and from that moment, I was completely hooked.
Yeah. So after you'd done that, what was your thoughts? Where were you going to head next?
Well, at that point, I was just like, I quite fancy another one of these. So that season, I did a couple more sprints, and then because I was living down in Cornwall, I then did Perranporth, which is well known, especially in Cornwall. But it was rated by Triathlon Plus as one of the top 5 hardest triathlons in the country at the time, partly because of the sea swim.
And what distance is that?
It's a 1 kilometre sea swim, 37.5 kilometre bike, and a 7.5 kilometre run.
Right.
But the bike is really hilly. Really. It follows the coastal path out of Perranporth down towards St Agnes.
Okay.
And if anyone who's been down that sort of neck of the woods, there's not a flat square inch in that stretch of road, on that stretch of road, and you do that twice.
Right.
And the swim, obviously being in the sea, you can get some horrendous conditions there. And the Surf Lifesaving Club, who run the triathlon, are world championship lifesavers. So essentially, whatever the conditions, they're going to run it. And there's only been a couple of times in the race history that they've stopped the swim.
Sounds like one I did in Redcar.
Oh, really? I did Redcar a couple of years ago, actually.
Yeah.
I loved Redcar. It was a good race. So Perranporth was then. So, I mean, there have been races where there's 500 people start, and I think only something like 100 made it out of the swim.
Yeah.
They were just pulling people out of the water, left, right, and centre. And then the run is 7.5 kilometres, but the first, I'd say 800 metres are across soft sand. Then you go up over a 200-foot cliff, down the other side, back onto the beach, and the rest is on the beach. So as far as triathlons go, it's pretty brutal. And so I did that, and again, really, really enjoyed it. And I was like, I quite fancy going a little bit longer. And then my partner and I went up to Sherborne because her parents lived in the area to see the UK Ironman, because it's something I'd never even really heard of at the time, just to see what it was about. Went up and had a look, and immediately, as soon as I was there, I was like, right, this is the next challenge. I've done the marathon this year.
I was just going to say, you'd already done the marathon, so you've ticked that one off.
Well, this is it. I was like, I've done a marathon, and I've started triathlon. Where can I push myself? After being told that I was never going to do certain things again, I've always been driven to see how far I can push myself. And as I said before, I think that's probably quite a common theme amongst multi-sport athletes, is that we're always seeing how far we can go, or how fast we can go. And it's that sort of personal competition rather than competition against others.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, isn't it? You just, although you're in a competition, you've got competitors, and there's always people that you've seen in other races that you want to be there or thereabouts, and they've beat you, or and they're a marker as to how you're improving, I guess, each time you race. But it is ultimately about yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's that personal journey. So yeah, that was it. I was like, right, 2008, Ironman UK, I'm coming to get you, type thing. So at that point, I started taking training a lot more seriously, and started looking up, researching about how I should be training, because I knew that I couldn't just do what I did for the marathon to get around that course. So I started doing a lot of reading, and I guess my my early sources of information were very much books. I did a lot of reading. Joe Friel, principles of periodization, and all those sorts of ideas. Then started designing my own programs. 2008 season came around. Did a middle distance at the start of the season, which down in Marazion, down in Penzance, which was really good. Really enjoyed it. And I thought, well, if I can enjoy sort of something this distance, this middle distance, then I reckon I'm going to love the Ironman. So everything else that season, I just focused towards the Ironman in September. Again, it's one of those experiences, there's certain snapshots from it that are just so vividly imprinted into my brain. The sort of standing waist depth water at 6 a.m. as the sunrise sort of comes up with 1,500 other athletes just kind of waiting for the gun, knowing that it's going to be 12 hours or so before I see the finish line, and sort of trying to mentally prepare for that. That's something that will always stick in my head.
Yeah, so you managed to do that, obviously, off your own bat. There was no coaches involved, no triathlon club or anything. You were solo.
I've always been relatively solo, so I've never really been part of a triathlon club. I kind of worked a little bit with Bad Tri when I lived in Bristol.
Right.
I did some coaching for them with the Tri-Stars, so the youth side of things. So I used to do some of their swim sessions, but other than that, I've always pretty much done my own thing. I have had a coach, and I am currently coached, but at that point, no, it was all off my own back. It was all based on my own research.
Yeah, very good, very good. So from that then, that was 2008. Where did you go? What was your next venture?
Well, from there, it was funny because the fact that I just got into this quite so as much as I had and looked into the training and all that sort of stuff, it even changed my career. I then, at the time, I was working in the oil industry, but I then became a personal trainer and sports massage therapist and moved to Bristol. Bristol's got a very, very vibrant and very tight-knit and very large triathlon scene. So as I mentioned, Bad Tri, they're a massive club, and you can't go to any race anywhere without seeing one of their members somewhere. So I kind of got involved with them. I kind of had a bit of a couple of fallow years, I guess, where I was just meddling in some local sprint distance stuff, just because I was setting up my business. I didn't have a huge amount of time to train. I also had my first child, so then you're juggling self-employment with young children, and I just dabbled. It became more of a social thing for me than anything particularly still serious. But then I started getting, just from, I think, being a personal trainer, my fitness started improving naturally by itself without having to actually do any form of structured training. My performances started improving, and I was identified by Bad Tri as someone who they wanted to put on their development program, which for me, it kind of came out of the blue, because I wasn't really doing anything that, I wasn't structured training. So I thought, oh, well, if I can get some support here and get some structure to my training, maybe I could get quite quick.
Yeah.
And then that unfortunately fell through, but the sponsor for that development team still wanted me on board. And they were a company who unfortunately aren't around anymore, but it was the Triathlon Shop in Bristol.
Okay.
And I ended up racing for them for 4 years or so. So I was fully supported by them, still self-coached with a little bit of assistance from Bad Tri and their head coach. But because I was then getting a bit more support and I realised that I could potentially get quite a lot quicker, I started really focusing on my training. someone said to me, well, how about going for the world champs? And I was like, what are you talking about? I had no idea about British age group racing and all that sort of stuff. It's just not something that I'd ever looked into, because I just assumed that, these guys were racing way above where I was. And then, as you said in previous episodes, you start looking at times of qualification times and other bits and pieces, and you go, oh, hold on, that's not that. I'm not a million miles away from that. I think perhaps I could give it a go.
Yeah.
And the first year I qualified was Auckland in New Zealand in 2012. So the whole thing became this a massive adventure.
What distance was that at?
That was sprint. So by this point, I was focusing purely on sprint stuff, purely on trying to go as fast as I possibly could.
Yeah.
Because it just really fitted with the amount of time that I had to train. I've always felt that middle distance is probably my distance. Even after that one middle distance race that I did back in 2008, I've always felt that I'm a middle distance athlete rather than sprint or long, for that matter. But I've never really had the time to train for it, so I've just stayed trying to get as quick as I can.
What race did you qualify to get to Auckland? What was the?
I think I raced Eton, and again that was one of those ones where it was the first time I'd ever raced at a venue like that, where it is pan flat. It is, you can see all of your competition the entire way around. You know exactly, you can gauge your efforts and all that sort of stuff. So that was a really bizarre kind of different type of racing for me. Because normally you're just, you're just out on roads pretty much by yourself, and you're just cycling along. You're just cycling as hard as you can, but not necessarily knowing what's coming up. So racing in an environment where a lot of the variables are now controlled, because there's no traffic and there's no, other than the odd duck walking across the footpath.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that form of racing.
Was that drafting or non-drafting?
That was non-drafting.
Non-drafting.
There was still non-drafting back in 2012.
Yeah.
All on TT bikes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you qualified for Auckland. That went well.
Yeah. Auckland went amazingly well. I ended up, obviously, as you said previously in previous episodes, that I turned it into a bit of a holiday as well.
Yeah. So
I had a week in Auckland beforehand, staying with a friend. But the weather leading up to it was absolutely horrendous. It was really, really windy, really rainy, and I was like, oh no, it's going to be awful. It's going to be absolutely terrible come race day. But woke up on race morning and it's clear blue skies, wind had dropped. Being able to be in Auckland for the week leading up to the race, to watch the pros, and then a friend of mine was competing in the standard distance, and then he won his age group in the standard distance, and watching him do that,
brilliant.
It was just real buzz.
Yeah.
The opening ceremony and doing the Parade of Nations straight through the centre of Auckland. It was just absolutely amazing. It's just like nothing I'd ever experienced or ever thought I'd be capable of being part of.
Yeah.
I never, in my wildest dreams, like growing up, thought for a second that I would be able to represent my country at a sport and be involved in something like that.
Yeah, it is rather special.
Since then, I've actually been able to go to a Parade of Nations where my children have been able to walk with me in it, and being able to share that experience with them was something else.
Yeah, very special. From 2012, after you had experienced the World Champs, did you try and qualify again straight away?
Yeah. Basically, from that point forward, it was a bit like, got the bug now.
Yeah.
The problem was the following year was the World Champs were in, and triathlon has always been my thing, rather than duathlon. I have recently started going more towards duathlon, but it's always been sprint distance tri for a long time. I've kind of specialised in that area. The following year, the World Champs were in London. Tried to qualify at Bristol, but missed qualification by one spot, which I was gutted about, absolutely gutted.
Was that in the race itself, or was it a roll down that you missed?
That was on a roll down, so I was one spot off the bottom of the roll down. At that point, I was like, right, I'm definitely going to try and I've definitely got to get in next year. So immediately attempted to qualify for the following year, which was Edmonton in Canada, which I qualified for, but then we moved house, and then there's a whole series of catastrophes, which meant I had to give up my place. Right. So I didn't go to Edmonton, even though I qualified. So I was a bit like, really, really frustrated, really annoyed. By this point, I'd missed 2 years on the trot. So I was like, right, next year, I don't care where it is, I don't care what's going on, I am going to the World Champs. I'm going to get there. And the following year was Chicago. Again, sprint distance. And luckily, qualified. When I qualified for Chicago, Eton again, I believe. No, sorry, not Eton, Nottingham.
Okay,
Another one of those.
Was that at the Water Sports Centre?
Yeah. I really enjoy racing there. Yeah. Again, it's another one of those courses which is you can just gauge everything. Yeah. You know whereabouts you are. It's a nice format.
It's an interesting bike car.
It is, yeah. And qualified for Chicago. So off I went to Chicago for a week. I've never been to the States before, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Ended up staying in an Airbnb with two random other British age groupers. One who was only 18 at the time, and it was his first big adventure, and another guy who was a newbie to triathlon and sort of had qualified almost by accident, who was in my age group, and we had a real sort of camaraderie going on whilst we were out there, and we were taking the mick out of each other and winding each other up because we knew we were of a similar ability. So I was a much better swimmer than him, but he was much faster on the bike, and then we were much of a muchness on the run, so we knew it was going to come down to the wire on race day itself. And as it turned out, it couldn't have been any closer. He finished about 2 seconds behind me.
Oh wow!
And I took him out, took it out on the swim. He came back on the bike, and then it was a really, really hot day, and I died on the run, really, really died badly on the run, and he started winding me in, and I didn't even know he was there. I hadn't even clocked him, and crossed the finish line, turned around, and there he was, literally on my heels.
So moving on from Chicago, what have you done since?
Again, 2 sprint distances. I went to 2016. I didn't try to qualify. Money wasn't available for it, and I think it was Gold Coast. Basically, it was to the rate. It was Cozumel. Yeah. I was like, I just thought it's too far. It's too far, and I don't. By this point, I had my second daughter, and I was like, you know what? It's just not. I just can't justify spending that amount of money or that much time away from home.
Well, life takes over, doesn't it?
It does, and you've got to have a balance. My family put up with an awful lot with my training and my racing and all the rest of it. So sometimes, you've got to really think about decisions like that. Yeah. We're at the stage now where we can all go on holiday because my children are old enough to come out with us, and it not be, and us not struggle with it all. So it opens up things a little bit more. But at that time, it just wasn't. My youngest was only 3, and taking her to Mexico would have just been an absolute nightmare. Yeah. So I kind of gave it a year off, and then the following year the sprints were back in Europe in Rotterdam. So, and by that point, it was draft legal stuff.
Yeah.
I hadn't had a go at draft legal before, and I was like, I quite fancy this.
Yeah. Do you enjoy the drafting?
I like it? Very different style of racing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm quite lucky, as I said, quite lucky in that I'm a relatively strong swimmer, so I can come out near the front.
Yeah.
And I qualified for Rotterdam at Redcar.
Right.
In the draft legal race there. And I came out of the swim and I didn't realise quite how much I had to redline it on the bike, because I got out with the lead pack, but they just put the hammer down on the bike, and I'm out of the three disciplines. Cycling was definitely has always been my weakest. I'm working on it super hard this season. But I just got dropped really badly on the first lap. Then got swept up in the second group, but I was still recovering from being dropped by the first group, so I got dropped by them, and then managed to stick with the third group, who we made some inroads into the two groups ahead. But it was fast and furious racing. It was really scary. In fact, in points, it was really quite scary.
You've got to know what you're doing on the bike, haven't you?
Yeah. It's. I mean, I saw there was a guy who we were riding along. We must have been 3 abreast at the time. I was in the middle, or 4 abreast even. And this guy went to reach for his water bottle just as he hit a drain cover, and that was it. I didn't see him again. It was like all I heard was the scraping of carbon, and then he hit a lamppost.
Oh.
And I think there were three athletes blue lighted away on that race because it was so fast and so furious. And if you haven't got half decent bike handling skills or are used to riding in packs, it's a totally different ball game.
Yeah, and again, it's a flat and fast course, isn't it, Redcar?
Yeah, and technical in parts.
Yeah,
and a lot of street furniture that you've got to be aware of.
Yeah, well. I remember racing it myself, and I nearly went in the back of a parked car. We come round a bend, and it was just, where's that come from,
Yeah, just there, right in front of you.
Yeah.
So if anyone, I would say, is looking to get into the drafting side of things, so the sprint distance, age group stuff, my big piece of advice would be to get some practice in riding in groups. Get out there with your local bike clubs, and get used to riding on people's wheels, or having people ride on your wheel, or just riding in a big group fast and really hard, because it's a different ball game. Yeah,
wise words. So that was for Rotterdam.
Rotterdam was brilliant. And earlier on, I said I'm not much of a team player, which is why I've chosen quite a solitary sport. But it was funny because you were racing obviously in your team colours, and because you're able to draft, you get packs of guys all riding together.
Yeah.
So the first part of the swim was great. It's pretty non-eventful, as most swims are generally. But out onto the bike course, in the first part of it, I was kind of by myself, like picking off 1 or 2 athletes from other countries. But then I spotted a couple of guys that I knew, and sort of managed to catch up with them, and we then caught up with a couple of other guys we knew. And within, before we knew it, there was a group of 5 GB athletes, absolutely smashing it down these bike paths. In full formation, sort of one on the front for 20 seconds, peels off. The next one, 20 seconds, peels off. It was absolutely, and we were just going past people that they were going backwards. It was probably one of the most memorable bike segments of any race I've ever had. Just because to be able to race like that was something that I've never ever done before or since.
Yeah, certainly an experience. Moving on from Rotterdam, what was the next race?
Last sort of GB representation was I raced up in. I decided not to go for the ITU. That's right. Gold Coast was that year, 2018. I decided not to go for ITU. I went for ETU and raced at the Europeans up in Glasgow.
All right, yeah.
Which, I mean, it was almost like a national championship.
Yeah.
I qualified for that by the skin of my teeth through a roll down. But I got up there, and it was another level. You know, all the guys who qualified were unbelievably fast. It was a great race, but my performance, placings wise, wasn't great. But compared to, I was really pleased with how I had gone. But when I looked at my rankings, it was quite clear that there was a whole other caliber of athlete there.
Fantastic. So was that the last race you did for GB?
Yeah, that was my last GB race.
Yeah.
I wanted to race in Bermuda next year.
Yeah.
So my plan was to try and qualify this year for sprint distance in Bermuda.
Right.
For the ITU, but obviously with the current situation, I think that's going to be put on hold.
Yeah.
My other plan was duathlon and attempt to qualify for the duathlon world champs, because the Bedford Autodrome in October, which I'm still eyeing up. That's still kind of on the cards, hopefully. And I'll aim for duathlon qualification for next year. But it was all supposed to work out so beautifully, because this year I was supposed to be racing the Norseman in August, and then I was going to do Bermuda next year. But unfortunately, the Norseman's had to be cancelled, and we've all been rolled over to next year.
Yeah.
So I can't really do Bermuda and Norway in the same year. My bank manager would not be very happy with me if I did.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know what's going to happen, do we, actually? Things are just getting cancelled event after event now, aren't they? So I think it's this year, I think, is pretty much a write-off in my mind, and it's sort of like taking stock and and then just building for next year and see what happens.
Well, yeah, I mean, we amongst the Norseman athletes, it's one of those races. I think that it's even more of between the athletes. It's even more of a community feel than other races, only because it's so iconic. That we find ourselves in this really almost privileged position that we've known we're doing the Norseman since last November, and now we've got till a year in August to prepare for it.
Yeah.
We as a group of athletes should be able to go out there and be so well prepared for it.
Yeah.
That it'll be no other time it's ever been held.
Yeah. Well, let's hope so. Let's hope it all works out, and it can be done. So a few questions then, just to finish off. What do you think from the beginning of your multi-sport sort of adventure to where you're at now? What do you think you've learned and changed and adjusted and improved? What are the most sort of like poignant parts of the process?
Almost every race feels like a bit of a learning experience. As I mentioned, that first race with the double knots in your shoes, and then you go, okay, how can I overcome that problem? Oh, elastic laces are a thing. I'll go buy some of those. So I guess for me, it's making sure to improve is just to reflect on every little learning opportunity and go, okay, how can I messed up a little bit there. How am I going to improve on that next time? What is there something that I can do, or I don't like to say, is there something I can buy that will sort of iron out that problem? But when it's something like something as simple as elastic laces, then just to combat a problem. And so I guess the learning point is that if there's a problem, there's always a way around it.
Yeah, good point.
You can always find a way around the problem if you do enough research, and if you go out and you speak to people, or you look up podcasts or videos, or that sort of stuff, you can always find a solution.
Yeah. So, other than this podcast, obviously, what other resources do you sort of go to?
I am a Tridot ambassador. So
Yeah.
Tridot are a company in America.
Yeah, I listen to the podcast actually. They are quite entertaining.
Yeah, I use their podcast quite a lot. They're really, really good. So I use them. I speak. I speak to a lot of people. I try and get involved in as many different things as I can. So just go out and get involved.
Yeah.
In anything you can. Tomorrow I'm taking part in a virtual X-Tri race, and Tim Don's going to be on it speaking. So all this sort of stuff is out there.
Yeah.
You just need to be on the lookout for it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, podcasts, talking to people, and shows like GTN. Generally for product type stuff, I will go to people I know and people I trust. But for tips and tricks on how to improve technique and speed, I'll listen to podcasts and watch videos and stuff like that.
And just going on that, then, hints and tips. What would you give to somebody in multi-sport at the moment doing races who wants to progress and an attempt to sort of like qualify maybe next year or the year after to represent GB? What would you say to them?
I would say, one, it's not as out of your reach as you probably think it is. That goal is probably more attainable than you realise. But on the same lines, having a coach for a season or two is worth its weight in gold. If you don't, you can do all the reading in the world, but unless you have a really, really good understanding of how your body is responding to the training pressures you're putting under it, which a good coach, by looking at your data, will be able to figure out, you won't make as much progress as you possibly could.
Yeah.
So I would say it's not as far out of your reach as you think it is, but to make those gains faster, get a coach.
Yeah. Wise words again. Wise words. And finally, what's your favourite piece of equipment, kit that you've got?
Favourite bit of kit.
And why?
It sounds really boring, but my turbo trainer.
Right.
I love the fact that I can absolutely nail a bike workout with the turbo trainer. I can put in way more effort safely on a turbo trainer than I can out on the road.
Yeah.
And it allows me to fully push myself to my absolute limit without endangering myself.
Yeah.
So for those gains on the bike that I really needed to make, getting a smart turbo it's probably been my very best investment.
And what do you link it up to?
Zwift. The interactivity on Zwift and being able to go on there and race. And next week I'm hopefully going to take part in a team time trial on there, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's just at the moment I haven't found anything that really compares.
No, it's a great, especially in these times that we're in at the moment. It's just a great piece of equipment, and clubs can get together. I don't know whether you listened to Nick Price's podcast last time out, episode 2. He's come up with a duathlon on Zwift, and we also do races every now and then. And it's just been brilliant. Yeah, he's on Facebook and he puts announcements out, and it's just been really good. So every Saturday he does a duathlon, and I think this Saturday is the first one where he's actually going to do a proper duathlon. I think previously it's just been a run and a bike because of the restrictions on people being able to go out. but now it's going to be a proper duathlon, so a run and a bike and a run. So yeah, that's good. And like you say, there's loads of things that people are doing out there that you can use Zwift for. And yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a fantastic bit of kit. So thank you ever so much for spending your Friday afternoon and chatting away.
Absolute pleasure.
Really do appreciate it. Please spread the word to everybody you can about this, and let's build support and momentum, because I think it's a really great idea for people to become aware of, you know, what it takes to become a GB, well, an age group multi-sport, not just GB, because we've all started out liking to run, bike or swim, haven't we? And so thank you ever so much. Have you got anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap it up?
No, I don't think so. Just that with the current climate, just I think everyone needs to stay safe and keep training, because it's really good for your mental health, and just keep training. Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Jules.
Cheers, Rick.
Take care. Bye. Wow, what a story! What a journey! It never ceases to amaze me how we can come back from adversity. Jules has had some great adventures, and I've loved hearing about his journey into multisport. So thanks for sharing, Jules, top man, and good luck with what's to come. And if you feel inspired and want to tell us about your journey into multisport, please get in touch, and you can find us at agegroupmultisportpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like what you've heard, please leave us a comment, share, subscribe and like. And until next time, stay safe, keep training and love the process.